everyone for joining us today. By way of introduction, my name is Laurel Reitman. I'm the General Manager for Dynamics 365 for Talent.
And Lydia Williams. I'm part of the technical product marketing team for Dynamics 365 for Talent.
Excellent. And so today, the goal of this session is really to give an overview and introduction to Dynamics 365 for Talent. As we've been out there talking with customers and doing sessions, we realize the product is still relatively new. And so we wanted to take this occasion to lay out a little bit of the landscape, why we're investing in this area, and what the product is. So I'm going to go through some, talk about the digital transformation of human resources, what our product vision is for Dynamics 365 for Talent, talk about some of the capabilities of the product, and then Lydia is going to do an in-depth demo of our Attract and Onboard products to give you guys a flavor. We also, and I have a slide at the end, of a number of additional sessions that we have around talent at kind of the 201 and 301 level. So a great opportunity to learn more about the product. So I think hopefully a number of you have seen, and Satya certainly talked about this in the keynote, when we talk about digital transformation, there are a number of key pillars and areas where we think about that, either engaging with customers, optimizing operations, transforming your products, and my favorite, which is really about empowering employees, and how do you address people as part of that equation. Because if you think about what you're trying to do from a business perspective around transforming your business and transforming your processes, it is critical to have the right people in place, right? While we have dreams of software doing everything in the future, today people are just such a critical part of the process. And that's where empowering employees and what we're doing around the people part of the digital transformation comes into play. Now, when you take a step back and look at the landscape of what a human resources leader is looking at, or what we face as employees within the organization, there are really 5 key trends that we see that we use to inform what we're doing from a product development standpoint. The first, and really the most important, is the war for talent, or the scarcity of talent. When you look at the market landscape today, and anyone at a company who's trying to do hiring, I think, faces this, it is really hard to find good people. Now, it's not that there aren't people out there, but matching the skills with the opportunity and finding those folks kind of needle in the haystack is a really big challenge for organizations. Or you get a ton of applicants, and they just don't match what you're looking for. So this is really, as we listen to HR leaders, as you look at your organizations, the lack of talent whose skills match your opportunities kind of heads and shoulders above. But there are 4 other trends that really inform what we're doing and what we see from a workplace perspective. The second is AI, and I love talking about AI in the context of HR because we have 2 opportunities to leverage it and also really to face the impact that it has. The first is, as we introduce AI into our workplace, it changes the skills and the form of work. So jobs that used to be done by a person now can be done with AI, which means that individuals need to take on new skills, take on new opportunities, either because their job has gone away or because they need to have a new set of skills to interact with the workforce. So if you take, for example, manufacturing, where we've introduced robotics and other forms of automation into that workplace, whereas in the past, someone with really strong hands-on capabilities was actually doing the manufacturing. Now they need to have digital skills for how do they interact with those systems in place. And so we've got 2 opportunities with AI. One, certainly great opportunities to invest in how you automate these HR workflows and processes, but also it creates, yet again, the skills gap and opportunity there. Now, I think what sets Microsoft apart when we think about AI is making sure that we're applying it in ethical ways. And we'll talk about that a bit as we look at how we're applying machine learning and others in HR processes. A third big trend is really a change in the workforce and how people work. And so one of the terms that you often hear bandied around is the gig economy workforce, but really what it points to a change in how we think about work and how we approach work. We get feature requests for, well, I've got 2 people in a job, and that's not even something you would think of in the past. But as people look for more fluidity and flexibility in their work, it means we need to think about how we approach workers and what that means when they come to work differently. And also how you think about leadership. I think, again, if you look back 30 years, it was a very hierarchical organization. And today what people look for in the workforce is differences in leadership, and that anyone within the team and the organization can be a leader. The fourth, and it's exciting to see it play such a presence here at Ignite, is the importance of diversity and inclusion. And how do you make sure that you're driving to a more and more diverse workforce? Studies have shown that the more diversity that you have in your workforce, you drive greater innovation, you drive greater business results as a part of that. And gender and ethnicity are a part of that, but you also see ranges of age or geographic diversity really helping to drive that business results. But then inclusion becomes incredibly important, because if you bring together a diverse workforce, but you're not addressing how making everyone feel like a cohesive team, they're going to just turn out and not retain. And so that's an area where we've invested in tools like Onboard we'll talk about to help make those employees feel like they're part of the organization. And I think the fifth trend and one that you see is people are really looking to be part of an organization that they feel like has purpose, and that the culture that they're looking for matches their values and needs. And so with these trends, this is really the landscape within which we see HR transforming. And it means that we need to think differently about how we approach tools for human resources and for employees. And so, in the past, it really was around the lack of qualified applicants, and certainly the scarcity of talent is a big problem. But when you're in this war with everyone else to get that best talent into your organization, you want to land them quickly. You want to make sure that they understand your organization. And that's where investing in tools like offer management to help make sure that you can get those best employees in quickly. And when you look at organizations, traditionally it's been very opaque. I can't tell you the number of business leaders I talk to who tell me they don't even know how many employees they have at the organization. And it is a common thread of just how do I get better visibility into my workforce, know who works here, so that I can help make sure they're developing, that I've got this great talent in-house available to me. And certainly, there's a ton of training out on the market, but I think looking at how can you make sure that as you're delivering experiences, and we think about this with things like the candidate experience, that it's personalized and it's tailored to that individual so that they're having the best experience. And certainly disengagement. If I've got a bunch of employees and they're not doing their best work, we need to be driving for inclusive culture and teams. And so for Dynamics 365 for talent, we really place this within the context of kind of how we talk about the modern talent life cycle. And it starts with thinking about, from an internal perspective, what skills, what employees do I need in my workforce, and being planful and thoughtful about what that looks like as the groundwork for my talent acquisition process. And then finding that best talent. And one of the places we're delighted to partner is with LinkedIn, which is a great source of talent on the marketplace. Certainly not the only one, but we're excited to be able to show our integration with LinkedIn to be able to find that really phenomenal talent. And then Dynamics 365 for Talent Attract helps make sure that we have a process to quickly find that best talent and bring them onto your organization with Onboard. And what we focused on with Onboard is not just the traditional administrative HR forms, and certainly there's tools and procedures around that, but what we've really tried to rally around is making it really easy for hiring managers to get information out to their employees before they start. In some geographies, particularly in Europe, it can be months before someone accepts a job and lands. And we certainly see this here at Microsoft, where you've got college hires, had an amazing summer after their internship, and then it's 9 months before they show up for full-time work. So how do you continue that engagement? And also, once they come into the organization, have a phenomenal amount of success with that. And longer term, we think about the life cycle, including things like learning and development, and how can you make sure that you're landing the great hires, making sure they're retained and engaged, and then surrounding all of this with analytics and insights to help drive action. Now, the reason we here at Microsoft think we're differentiated when it comes to these talent challenges is really 3 key areas. And this is where, again, you'll see it permeating through our experiences. The first is really delivering against a unified platform and delivering on best-in-class customer experiences. I think when you're dealing with employees, when you're dealing with candidates, it is really critical that you're delivering these consumer-grade, easy-to-use experiences. That's what they expect. That's what employees expect at work and what candidates look for in a company. But the unified part really comes in the form of leveraging data from Dynamics 365, certainly within Attract, but leveraging Office 365 and LinkedIn as well. So as an example, one of the features we'll highlight a little bit later is some automatic interview scheduling, where we can use all the free busy data and really optimize that process from a recruiting flow perspective. The second area we're indexing around is how to drive intelligence into that process, both from automating routine tasks to help speed up those parts of processes, similar to what I talked about in interview scheduling, but also how do we make sure that we're driving intelligence so that you know you're hiring the right people and maybe sifting through those resumes as quickly as possible. And the other area where Microsoft historically differentiates, and we're really focused on, is platform capabilities. Because when you think about what you're doing from a talent acquisition and an onboarding perspective, each of you in the audience is going to have a slightly different workflow, or maybe something that you want to do that's unique to your company and organization. I think that's what makes each company unique and special, is we have standardized processes, we have standardized workflows, but how can you extend and customize to make sure your brand and your company shines through? So taking a step deeper, I want to talk a little bit more about some of the challenges specifically in the talent acquisition space. So the biggest challenge I talked about really was that scarcity of talent. And what that results in is really high cost to hire, either because those positions are unfilled or, you're just paying a ton of money out there to sourcers and recruiters and others to find those candidates. I think the other piece that has certainly become clear to us is in traditional systems, everyone's disconnected. You have the hiring managers over here, you have the candidates over here, you have the recruiters over here. Everyone has a different view of what's going on, which means you've got these disconnected experiences, which slows things down and doesn't allow the collaboration and the single 360 view of what's going on. I think that really plays in to the case for hiring managers, where they have no idea what's going on, so they can't give any feedback to the recruiters about what they need, and it really decreases the time it takes to hire and get those employees onboarded onto the equation, or into the company. And I think lastly is, candidates who feel like they're being ghosted. The worst thing is if a candidate has no idea what's going on, because they're going to be out there tweeting and posting about your company in a negative light. And so giving candidates, good, bad, and ugly, visibility into their experience really improves your brand and reputation overall. So what we've seen specifically, kind of coming to some statistics around this, is that 72% of candidates never hear back. And if they don't hear back from a recruiting standpoint, they're probably not going to buy your products either. And so when you think about candidates and coming through your pipeline, even the ones who you end up not hiring, you still may want engaging with your brand and engaging with your products. Now, 61% of employees, the job that they land in is different than what they expected. Now, some of that is better job descriptions up front, but it's also how do you set those employees up for success so that they know what success in 30, 60, and 90 days looks like to really drive that better employee experience. And retention is a huge problem. The number of employees who are no longer staying in their jobs for any amount of time or leaving within the first 6 months, that is decimating your cost and quality of hire, because you need the people who you've spent all this time and energy hiring to onboard and stay within the organization. And so when we think about Dynamics 365 for talent and think about the features and capabilities that Lydia will walk through, they kind of fall across 5 key vectors. 1, helping you find talented people. 2 is really those collaborative experiences. How do we make sure that it's really easy for everyone who's part of the hiring process to work together? The 3rd is how do we make it easier to make smarter hiring decisions, driving intelligence, AI, machine learning into the equation. And then setting that talent up for success. We've piloted Dynamics 365 for onboard within a number of teams within Microsoft from an organization perspective, kind of grassroots up, and really seeing high satisfaction both from the hiring managers and the employees around how those employees feel included, how they come up to speed, checking in code more quickly, which certainly hits the bottom line and helps them stick around the company longer. And then we'll be able to demonstrate some of the extensibility capabilities we have as well, both light customization as well as being able to leverage the Power Platform with what we've got with Power BI, Power Apps, and Flow. So we're going to take you through a journey from the hire to onboard experience and show you some of the configuration that you have. We'll show some of the candidate experiences around what that looks like. The LinkedIn recruiter integration, which allows talent out in LinkedIn to be leverage and visible and attract and vice versa, as well as assessments, interview scheduling and feedback, offer management, et cetera. And so I'm going to invite Lydia now to do a demo of the product.
Perfect, thank you. Yeah, absolutely. So I think let's just jump into the hiring scenario, work our way through, and then we're also going to call out the places where we use it in Microsoft and the specific problems that that's solved for us. So if we start at the very beginning as a hiring manager, maybe we'll pause for a second. We're back. Yeah, we'll start at the beginning. I'm a hiring manager. I have a vacancy in my team, and I want to go ahead and fill it. And as you said, the first step for us is making sure that the hiring manager, the recruiter, and the candidate all have a really strong experience. And we're trying to remove the need to go to Outlook to get information about interviews and go to Dynamics 365 for Talent to go get information about candidates and go to the LinkedIn to see their LinkedIn profiles. So what we've done is acknowledge, let's have one clear starting place for my hiring manager who can come in and see what interviews do I have coming up and what else is coming up in my future schedule and what tasks have been assigned to me. So that this starts to become my starting point as part of the hiring process.
Yeah, and I think it gives everyone a central view of the same data of the same people, which makes sure that as candidates are moving through the pipeline, everyone knows where everyone kind of stands and is at.
Yeah, exactly. So the next thing I can do is then actually see all of the jobs that I have access to, and that's any job that I have a role in as part of the hiring team, whether that's as the hiring manager or as a recruiter or as an interviewer. And what's actually sitting behind each of these is ultimately some kind of template. So we want to make this as a consistent process as possible. And if we have what good looks like, let's make it much easier for the various hiring teams to apply that. So if we go into one of these as an example, to start off with, it's what is my hiring process? And this is very simple. Let's close that down. Drag and drop. I can come in, add in as many stages as I want. And then behind each of these, there's some kind of rules or logic. So in my case, I've included an assessment as part of like a pre-assessment before I bring a candidate in for an interview. And in this case, I've actually included a Koru soft skills assessment. So that's a third-party assessment tool that I've included directly within my hiring process. And when we get to that point in the process, that will get fired off to the candidate so that they can then complete that before we bring them in for an interview. Okay. The next thing I've done is come in and I've said, okay, we're going to have an interview. And this is the first example of extensibility, really, where we decided to include a Power App. I want some support during my interview of what would be good cultural fit questions to ask my candidate. And again, as we go through the flow, we'll see that. But it's been really easy for me to simply come in, add in my Power App ID. And for anyone in the room who doesn't know what Power Apps are or is, Power Apps is a Microsoft tool that we can use to build mobile apps, low code, no code. It's got a sort of a PowerPoint interface and making it easy to set up mobile apps for any purpose, really, within a couple of hours, rather than it taking, weeks to create those apps. So I got a colleague to create me one literally in 2 hours that really simply had some questions and the ability to add some notes. But that could have any function, and then using Flow can basically trigger workflow to another solution to then prompt some kind of action. So a really easy way to extend maybe more questions we want to ask or different stages we want to include, whatever it is to actually personalize it to our organizational fit. So I can keep going down and I've then added in an interview. And we're just seeing it's really easy for me to add descriptions and then choose simple radio buttons. Do I want this functionality in or don't I for this specific process? And once I've created this, I'm ultimately templating it so that I can then choose, we'll just discard that, choose the best template for each of my jobs. So if we now go into one of these jobs as an example, I'm hiring for a data scientist. And the first thing I want to be able to do is actually personalize this. And we, again, think this is really crucial because when we were talking before about the statistics about this is not the job I expected to be hired for, that's not just necessarily the skills, it's also this isn't the team that I thought I was joining. So opening up the ability to contribute to the entire job description and the skills that we're requesting and the information that we're sharing as part of our job advert means that we're much more likely to bring in candidates who are a better match for the team, both from a skills level and a cultural fit. Yep. So ultimately, less surprises. The next thing I can do is say, okay, I want to bring in my hiring team from day one. I don't want them to wait until the night before when they get a resume and an email. I want them to be able to come in, log in immediately as soon as we kick off this hiring process and be able to see as candidates are being added in as prospects and applicants and understand what job have we offered and who are we bringing in for those candidates. So this ties into Office 365. I can type in the names of my team, it will pull them through, and I can ultimately assign them a role. And then they will be invited to come in to use Dynamics 365 for Talent to contribute to the hiring process. The next step, again, we've already seen the process template, but at this point, I'd again have the opportunity to tweak it if I want to for the specific job. And then the final thing I can do is post it to LinkedIn, and it will post it out as a job. And the second thing is our own careers website as well. So we have the option to both post to one or both of them, and just give candidates different areas to be able to access these vacancies. So once I've posted this, the next step, historically, typically would be then to hand over to a recruiter and actually have that set up here. So we have tight integration with LinkedIn, and we find that a lot of our recruiters use LinkedIn Recruiter. I'll just log into this.
Yeah, so oftentimes within the hiring process, your recruiter and sourcers will be living in LinkedIn with a LinkedIn Recruiter license, and then the hiring team is over in Dynamics, where you've got the hiring manager, interviewers, and others as part of that experience.
So what we find is recruiters are using LinkedIn Recruiter. There's lots of tools within LinkedIn Recruiter to be able to put in the specific skills you're looking for. That will then bring back potential candidate matches. Then they'll start to interact with them via email and find out if they're interested in new positions. I'm sure we've all received many of those emails to our own LinkedIn profiles. What happens if you are now a recruiter using LinkedIn Recruiter and Dynamics 365 for Talent is not only can I see their full profile, but I can then start to interact directly with Dynamics. So the first thing I can see is when were they last pushed out to Talent, what job were they applying for, what role was that? But actually, I then have a full history of all of their interactions. So firstly, which jobs have they applied for, what stages did they get to, and what date range was that? But then importantly related to that, if they didn't accept a job, or they did, what was the reason for that? So what was the specific interview feedback? And it might be, maybe they were a terrible cultural fit. It might be that they were underqualified for a role or overqualified. But we want it to be as easy as possible for that recruiter to understand our business's relationship with that candidate. And then I can also see notes as well. So just giving me a really clear understanding of the state of play. And what I can actually then do is export them out to a role, type in the role really easily, and it will bring up all the vacancies that we currently have for that recruiter, and they can push them straight out to Dynamics 365 for Talent.
What's great is once they're back in Talent, you can marry folks you might find with LinkedIn with folks who've applied directly, internal talent, all of your potential candidates, and then manage that whole set of applicants within Dynamics 365 for Talent.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think there's two things there as well. Firstly, I can link them directly to a specific job, but what I can also do is have a talent pool as well. So these might be candidates where I don't know where they fit in the organization at the moment, but I suspect that they're a good cultural fit and also that they have skills that we might ultimately want in some of our roles. And by clicking that button in LinkedIn, it will automatically push them out to the specific job, and then I can then see their full LinkedIn profile there, and then maybe any other documents that they share. So if we now go back into the job that we've been looking at, once we start to receive those applications, anyone who's part of the hiring team can come in and see them. And what we wanted to do was make it easier to manage really high volumes of applications. And using machine learning, we can now automatically apply a process that will look at all of the applicants who've applied for this position, look at their resumes, look at the skills that they say they have, compare it to the skills that we've described in the job description, and then start to suggest candidates that might be a stronger match for that specific role.
And this is an area when I was talking about AI earlier that we're taking a very thoughtful approach. Because one of the challenges with talent acquisition and with people use cases is sometimes if you use historical data or processes and systems that inherently had a bunch of bias in it, you're going to introduce that into your new models. And so as we're approaching this and thinking about our use of AI within talent, we're trying to be very thoughtful to make sure that we're looking at the landscape, doing as much as possible to have a diverse and inclusive perspective around hiring and an ethical use of AI as part of these processes.
Yeah, absolutely. So if I then jump into one of those candidates who is a good match, as you can see a few things. Firstly, we're closing that LinkedIn loop, so I'll be able to see their full LinkedIn profile. And that loads in a second. That will show me the profile, and it will also show me any notes from the recruiter as well. So again, if I'm the recruiter, I can live in LinkedIn Recruiter, and if I'm the hiring manager, I can live in Dynamics 365 for Talent, but ultimately have a complete view from either side. The next thing I can then do is see their resume and any other documents they've attached as part of that application as well. So again, I'm in one system. It doesn't matter that historically this would have been viewed within Outlook, that someone would have emailed to me. It's all in one place. And then I can start to add notes as well. So if we decide this candidate is a match, I'm then ultimately working my way through the process that was set previously. And every time we advance through one of these stages, what is actually happening is the candidate is then getting an email, giving them an update, telling them to direct themselves to the Dynamics 365 for Talent portal. So just as we want the hiring manager to have a great experience, we have one portal where the candidate goes for all interactions. And it looks like this. So I log in, and I log in, my security credentials can be my LinkedIn profile or any of my email accounts. So it could be Outlook, it could be Gmail. It will use the security element of those providers to validate my access. And then really simply I'm coming in and I can see the stages that I'm at. So I can see that I applied and I'd be able to see the application. I can then see a task that it's been allocated and then see, in this case, some dates that it's been suggested I come in for an interview. So it's really transparent for me as a candidate exactly where I'm at in the process. And that ties back to if I don't feel connected.
Absolutely. I mean, I think one of the things you see throughout both talent acquisition, but I would say any sort of interaction is no news is worse than bad news. It's better to know where you're at in the process and understand what's going on than to just hear nothing because you sit there waiting and kind of aren't able to move on to the next opportunity. But in this case with Cameron, I think we've decided we want to bring him in for an interview.
Yeah, exactly. So the next thing I want to do is bring him in for that interview. And if he had gone away and completed the assessment, the scores will automatically appear within Dynamics 365 for Talent. And we can have it that it will identify who has achieved those, so I then know which candidates to move forward with in an interview. And yeah, we want to go ahead and schedule. So if we just start this from scratch again and show you what that looks like. If I want to schedule an interview, I can come in, it will automatically pull in my hiring team. If I've suggested dates to the candidate and they have responded to say which ones are appropriate, it will automatically highlight those on this calendar for me. And I can then choose the date that I want to meet and then start to apply a little bit more logic. So is it a panel interview or is it one-to-one? Do we want to include Skype details if this is going to be a remote interview? And what's my duration? So if we go ahead and choose that, it's then going to suggest the best time to meet.
And so one of the things that I've really enjoyed working on Dynamics 365 for Talent is our ability to partner with Microsoft for our HR and IT organizations. And so as we've been developing the product, we've been able to work closely with Microsoft, who has a ton of interviews, ton of resumes, to see how can we optimize and help with those hiring experiences. And interview scheduling was a great example where there was a whole army of vendors whose job is nothing but interview scheduling. And so helping improve that experience for those employees, helping make them more efficient and effective is a huge ROI for anyone. And this is a huge pain point in overhead in almost every organization I've talked to.
Definitely, and I think in Microsoft, not only for the team doing the scheduling, but also for the teams, or every hiring manager in the organization who then received an invitation for an interview that was either pushed way later than it needed to be, or not necessarily accurate, and just not particularly logical. So it's gone away, it's looked at everyone's Outlook calendar in real time, suggested the availability, and then I can really simply push that out to them. So send a customized email, which could be templated, introduce them, show them that they have full access to that candidate's application, and then it will pop an invitation into their calendar that they can accept or reject. And then I can track that from within here without having to go out to Outlook.
Yeah, the old experience was 4 or 5 Outlook windows side by side. If you can imagine the size of the screen real estate you would need to have, and kind of keeping all that straight was certainly a big challenge within that organization.
So I can send that out to my interview team, and also when I send it out to the candidate, I can choose how much information I'm sharing with them. Do I want them to tell them the specific people they're meeting with so that they can maybe do some research on them, or do I want to keep it limited for now until they come through the door? So what I've then included here was the Power App that we saw previously. So as I said, a very simple example, I come in and I've chosen to include some different questions and the ability to add notes. Now this could be as complicated or as simple as you need, and this was I think a simple example of where we wanted to extend it, we wanted to provide some more information to the hiring team, and we wanted to find a way to quickly extend that. So I've included that, and then I can go ahead for the interview. And we can see here the candidate availability as it's been shared with them. So the next step is then interview feedback, and this was, again, a challenge that we faced in Microsoft, where it was awkward to record feedback. I needed to be on my laptop, I needed to be connected to the corporate network, entry rates were really low, and it was often recorded a few days after the interview when it wasn't really fresh in their mind, especially if you're meeting with 3 or 4 candidates on one day, it can all start to blur into one. So what we've done in Microsoft now is I can come in, I can complete this on my mobile, I can be prompted automatically to complete it at the end of an interview, and once I've captured my feedback, I can click onto this button again here on a mobile. It will give me information about the role and the position, see their resume, capture my feedback. I can ultimately say, are they a good fit for this role? But it could be more about, are they a good fit for the company, even if they're not a fit for this role? And once I've captured mine, I can then see my peers' feedback as well.
And that's one of the changes that we introduced both within our processes at Microsoft as well as in the application, is making sure that that feedback isn't available until you provide your own, to help reduce the bias. Allowing each member of the interview team to be able to provide their feedback before getting that shared with the other peers within the organization.
So I might go through one or more interviews, depending on how I've set up my process. And ultimately, we will decide on one or more candidates who are a match for that role. So we want to go ahead and generate an offer. And this is something we're actually working with Microsoft at the moment to start to roll this out, because this was a tool that, again, was co-authored with Microsoft HR, where they couldn't find a compelling tool in the market that they wanted to use. So we have essentially built out offer management functionality that will generate offer templates and offer packages for the candidates, that will pull all of the key information in, and again, standardizing this to make sure that it's following protocols and any standards that we need to meet within Microsoft and for our customers. It will come in, it will generate this offer automatically. I could then have any different stages of approval to make sure we are happy with it before we send it out to the candidate. And then that will ultimately get sent out to the same portal that they've been using the entire way through the process, and they can then sign that electronically. Once that offer has then been accepted, this is then the final stage of the hiring process, arguably one of the most crucial ones, because once we've found those candidates, as you said, depending on which country you're from, once that's been electronically signed, it could be a few days, it could be a few weeks. My norm is for it to be 3 months between accepting a job and then actually joining on day one. So what we've built is an onboarding tool to bridge that gap, because the statistics are incredibly high that if you don't engage during that period of time, employees just don't even turn up on their first day. There's no warning. They don't say, sorry, I don't want this job after all. They just feel disengaged and then don't turn up. And if they do turn up and the onboarding phase is not successful, then there's really high dropout rates within the first 2 years as a result of that initial engagement with the organization. So what we have here is our onboarding tool. Again, in Microsoft, we found the challenge we faced with onboarding was not necessarily getting documents signed and ordering laptops, but it was actually the cultural fit within the team. So as you said before, we presented this out as an option to different areas of the Microsoft organization who have now built their own templates in line with the culture of their own team to start to connect with their new hires. And what I can do is I can come in, provide some kind of welcome message, and then ultimately it's a collaborative experience. So I want to be able to bring in lots of different individuals to contribute to this guide. So firstly, I can manage my contributors, and I can say, who do I actually want to add in? And it will pull them through from Office 365. But then against each task, I'm saying, is this the new hire's responsibility, or is it actually the responsibility of somebody within our wider organization? So quite simply, I can have multiple different sections, and I've created before you start and after you start, and then you can add any number of activities. And it comes with a whole host of example activities, but also the ability to ultimately add in free text tasks, video links, sways, power-ups, again, extending the functionality, iframes, and so on. And if we just open up a few of these as examples, the first thing I can see is a video that's been assigned to my candidate with a specific due date, and I can then see a video that I need to access. And underneath each task, we ultimately have, can I access this with the personal email that I've been using for my entire hiring process, or do I need my corporate credentials? So we can make it so that once a candidate is then joined on day one, they can continue to use the same tool but unlock more functionality. So when I'm templating this out, I'm ultimately saying, are there individuals who regularly have specific tasks, or is it that each time it just automatically gets allocated to the candidate? And I've actually got different examples here, power apps, different tasks that can then be completed. The next thing we want to do is build a network, and especially I think Microsoft is a great example. The mantra within Microsoft is build your network, build your network, build your network, and we wanted to make it easier for our own employees and also for our customers' new hires to start to make those connections before they join. So firstly, I can start to introduce them to different contacts that they can then reach out to and understand what their role is with them. but actually Dynamics 365 for Talent will then look at my Office 365 usage, figure out who I'm interacting with regularly, and then suggest those as different contacts that they think the candidate should interact with to make sure they are having that broad spectrum of individuals to work with within Microsoft. So we've ultimately shown you there a track to the hiring functionality and onboarding, and how we can start from the very beginning, personalize the job to make sure we're attracting candidates with the right skill and cultural fit, how we integrate with LinkedIn to then pull those candidates into Dynamics 365 for Talent, how we can work through that personalized hiring process, ultimately make them a compelling offer as quickly as possible, and then once they've accepted that offer, onboard them so that they can be successful within our organization.
So that was meant to give you guys a good introduction into the problems that we're seeing in the HR space, how we think about how we're addressing those with Dynamics 365 for Talent. We have a number of other sessions here at Ignite that go, if you want to, a little bit deeper around more depth around the recruiting and the next level, and particularly some of the new capabilities that we've introduced in our fall release. And then we've also got Casey talking about what we're doing in Core HR, which is sort of an extension of what we've done in other parts of the business. On Friday, we'll go deep into the extensibility. We kind of gave you a flavor of what that looks like today, but talk more about what's available there. And then we have 2 sessions in the theater. One, talking about the use cases and scenarios of how we've adopted Onboard within Microsoft with Eleanor, who comes from the Windows organization. And then another session with our partners at Ceridian around our payroll integration with what we've got in Core HR. So that kind of wraps up. We'd be happy to take some questions from the audience in the field, or from the audience out there. And thank you guys so much for joining us for this introductory session today. So there's microphones around if it, oh yeah.
My question is, when you showed the interview feedback, the status and talent, all of that was in LinkedIn.
So the interview feedback and the status, all of those live both within Dynamics 365 for Attract, but they also get synchronized and pushed up to LinkedIn if you have the integration, if you have the recruiter licenses integrated with.
Okay. Well, I'm from the government, and
Yeah.
we're not using LinkedIn, so I wanted to make sure.
It's totally optional add-in. No need to do that whatsoever.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay, it just timed out, but I had another question.
Yep. Yeah, so we highlight LinkedIn because we think that that's a place where there's a lot of talent that lives. But one piece of feedback we often get, and I want to be super clear on, is we know that that's not the only marketplace for talent. So we have things like the career website, application process. With Dynamics 365 for Talent now on the Common Data Service for Apps, if you have other websites or sources of candidates that you want to pull into the application, all of that is possible as well. So the LinkedIn is totally optional, but we think certainly in some markets and cases a great differentiator.
The fields are also available in talent.
Oh,
Yeah, so
absolutely.
we're ultimately capturing the information
Yeah, yes,
in
absolutely.
Talent.
My next question is, I noticed that when you did the hiring team,
Yes.
that you just pulled the people from the global address list.
Yes.
Which is great, because now how does that work with Office 365? Do they have to, the global administrator have to give them a license in order to pull them from the global address list? That used to be for on-prem. You could just pick a person. Now online, it's a little more different.
Yeah, so I think we'll go more into licensing. I think Brandon has a section in his talk. But certainly our expectation is that the folks, in Office 365 would certainly have the Office 365 license. And the ones who are in Dynamics, the hiring team, a subset of those need the Dynamics for 365 licenses.
Okay. I got one more question. You did the hiring process, and I wasn't sure if the hiring process, when you went through creating it, if it was the templates. Were you using those words interchangeable? Can there be more than one template, one hiring process? I'm thinking about from volunteers.
Well, absolutely. So one of the reasons we have templates and we have the configuration in the hiring process is if you think about an organization, every role might have a slightly different hiring flow. And so the idea behind the templates is maybe every one of your customer success managers would have a specific hiring role, but your account managers would have a different profile. And so you'd use those templates as a way to quickly and easily configure the process. But also if you have a particular role that's just entirely entirely unique, you can also go within that particular job and customize it further as well, depending on your requirements.
Okay. I'm looking at it for volunteer management. We
Oh,
have a lot of
excellent.
volunteers and all across, the county. And
Yep.
so that's what I was looking.
Keeping track of all of those folks and helping bring them in and giving them visibility. Excellent.
I think one final thing to say as well is if anyone wants to have a play with the software, if you go to trials.dynamics.com, you can sign up for a free 60-day trial of everything that we've seen today, aside from the LinkedIn Recruiter license. So worth going and having a play with that.
Sort of a roadmap question. Any plans to include some kind of a learning management system to talent?
So at this point, and specifically from a roadmap perspective, what we're really talking about and focusing on is talent acquisition and onboarding. I think there's a ton of other areas, further down the line, but nothing that we're specifically announcing or talking about for kind of the rest of the talent lifecycle right now. Yeah, the exciting thing when you think about talent development is it's all really interconnected. You want the data from over here to feed over here, and so I think there's a ton of opportunity, but for now we're really focused on kind of talent acquisition and onboarding.
Okay, thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you, guys.
Have a good afternoon.